Welcome, I'm so glad you all could join me. I'm Chavah and you're watching Ask A Midwife. Hi everyone, this is Chavah, and this is a little bit of a personal story. I wanted to, as I start this channel, and I really want to talk more about all the different things that I feel are really, really important for you all to know. I think it's appropriate for me to share a little bit about myself and a little bit about how I came to be here speaking to you and my journey. Okay, so basically I have been involved with birth for about almost 22 years now. I am a midwife. A midwife is a person who delivers babies, who catches babies, who helps women throughout the pregnancy, who helps women throughout the birth process, give birth, and after the birth as well. It helps with newborn care, helps with the mother recovery, educating, empowering, making sure things are normal. It's been said, and I heard a lot in my training, that midwives are guardians of normal. Midwives protect the women, midwives protect babies, midwives make sure everything's going well, going normal. If things are veering off course, then we know what to do about it, and if we see an issue that we aren't going to be able to deal with, then we transfer to a person who can, a trained doctor, a physician, surgeon, whatever it takes to get the baby and the mother safely through the process. Okay, so basically I am a midwife. I'm licensed in the state of California since 2003 when I earned my midwifery certificate there. I did, however, get my start at the age of 20, which was almost 22 years ago now. And the start of my midwifery inspiration was actually just kind of, you know how sometimes things happen by accident. I was asked to attend a birth of a friend. A friend was expecting a baby, and she said, "Hey, could you come and help me?" And I said, "Well, I don't really know anything. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if I'm going to be able to be helpful to you." So she said, "Just come. Like, it's going to be fun. We're going to hang out. We're going to have snacks. We're going to watch reruns of Star Wars." And I said, "I think I could do that. I think I could hang out and eat your food and watch movies with you." And actually that's what we did for the early labor. And she basically had one of those really textbook amazing births, home birth. She had with her two really well-trained midwives from Oregon, which is where we were living at the time. And I came to her house and we spent time together, and then as things got later in the evening, things started to heat up. We took a long walk. The midwives kind of utilized my presence as a untrained doula, having me help her, support her in different ways, different positions, until later in the night when things got really intense and she was in the bath for a while. And time passed and she had a beautiful birth. And I just remember looking into that baby's eyes as she was born and thinking, whoa, that's incredible. I've never experienced anything like that in my life. It was so close to the most spiritual experience that I can remember having, is watching her be born and watching my friend. She was so strong, she was so amazing, she was so powerful, and I thought, I could do this. And that was really the first, and I was 20, and really, had a lot of growing up to do still. I can't say I was really a mature person at the time. Okay, so anyway, she went on to have 3 more children over the years, and we kept in touch. So the next birth I went to was a month later, and she was a mutual friend of the first woman who had had her beautiful home birth, and I was all set to help her have another, to have a beautiful home birth for her first. And I was at her house, and she labored, and she labored, and she labored, and we were concerned, but we kept a positive attitude, and hours turned into days, and she really wasn't progressing. And I remember bringing her to the hospital with the midwife. She had a nurse midwife attending her, and I remember going to the hospital with her and was just devastated for her when we learned that she needed a C-section, that the doctors at the hospital recommended that due to what was going on at the time, that she have a surgical delivery. And she ended up, she was fine. She had a beautiful baby. And I just remember those two experiences juxtaposed together, those two experiences side by side, and how they really impressed me so profoundly. And I went on to think, what, this is really intense. This is an important work. This is a meaningful work. This is an important profession. And and I went on to go to a couple other births in that same time frame. The third birth I went to was also a beautiful home birth. And I remember the midwife. I was still so inexperienced. I didn't really add anything except for just the support and what I meant to my friends. But she stuck me behind the woman. So I was actually sitting behind her as she pushed her baby out. And I just remember feeling her body like pushing, and just kind of like sort of vicariously feeling like how intense it was for her. And that was another really intense experience. So interestingly enough, the fourth birth I attended was actually the second birth of the woman who had the C-section. And she ended up having a beautiful vaginal birth after a C-section, which is called a VBAC. She had a home birth. She had a most amazing, most empowering birth. And it was really a full circle experience for me to have this really good friend of mine who had had a C-section after a really, a long, hard try to have a home birth, and ended up having a really, really empowering, wonderful, successful vaginal birth at home, just the way she wanted to. And that was the fourth birth I had experienced. What I did is I went on to join a study group, and it was a whole, maybe 15, 20 women, young women. Some were, young like I was, and with no children, and really very little actual practical experience. And other women were, farther along in their midwifery studies. And we would meet once a week, and we would study, and we would learn, and we would hear lectures, and she would bring other professionals in, and then once a week we would meet together as a group and go through skills and go through and talk. I remember we would be cooking a whole pot of beets to get the juice, and we would pour the beet juice on the the pads that we would use for the birth to practice our skills in measuring blood loss. And we would beat drums together in a certain rhythm to train our ears to recognize the fetal heart rate, what was 140 beats per minute and what was 160 beats per minute. And we did massage on each other, and she taught us a lot of different things. And at the time I was still so inexperienced with the actual hands-on that I didn't really integrate the things that I was learning. I rather just, I have a whole notebook when I look back and I think that's everything I learned. Wow. I didn't really, I felt I needed more. And this is like a dream. This was a dream for me, is the opportunity to go down to the farm in Tennessee, and learn down there in the Farm Birth Center and do their apprentice workshop. It was going to be 3 different one-week courses, and I was so excited. So on the way to the workshop, I stopped in San Diego, California, which is where my parents lived, and which is where I grew up, and I stayed at my parents' for a little while, and I ended up looking in the phone book under midwives. And I found a midwife, and I thought, I'm going to talk to her, I'm going to call her. So I ended up calling her, and she invited me to her house, and she sat down and she looked at all my information that I was showing her. This is what I'm going to learn. This is what I'm going to learn in the midwifery workshops. And she looked at me and she said, if you stayed in my practice and you worked with me, you'd learn all these things and more, and plus you'd have a full apprenticeship. And I thought about it, and I thought, wow, the responsible thing would be to stay. And the fun and exciting thing would be to go to the farm and have this great experience. And I remember it was like a real big sacrifice to say, okay, I'm not going to go to the farm. So I canceled my trip, and I actually stayed with her, and I stayed in an apprenticeship role in her practice for 3 years. And it was a really good experience. In the beginning, I didn't know how to take blood pressure. I didn't know how to draw blood. I didn't know how to, really palpate a baby, palpate is the method with which midwives, we touch the mother's tummy, we touch the abdomen, we feel the head, we feel the back, we listen to the heartbeat with the fetoscope. I'm going to be demonstrating all those things throughout hopefully when I make these videos, and I'll show you my birth kit, I'll show you my prenatal bag, I'll show you all the things that I keep in there. So it was a really good learning experience. She took me to births. At first I was just writing notes, charting, listening to heart tones, and then I began to have more skills. I began to learn how to check dilation, and eventually to catch the babies and to help the moms. And throughout this whole experience, I was also learning to be a doula. Actually, I had learned to be a doula when I first became inspired, like I explained with those other births. I went ahead and took a doula course offered by Doulas of North America at a school in Eugene, Oregon, in a midwifery school in Eugene, Oregon. And I started taking clients and going to births in the hospital, so I was getting a really good idea of how the process worked, and also how the process sometimes didn't work, especially in hospital settings where there was other dynamics happening with care providers who maybe didn't have the woman's, I'm not going to say they didn't have the woman's best interest at heart. They had what they felt was in the woman's best interest, and it wasn't always what was in the best interest of her own ideas for her own experience. So be that as it may, I had a lot of experience both home and in the hospital and birth centers, and I was attending a lot of births throughout this time. And it was really a really good experience, those 3 years that I spent. And by the end of the 3 years, I was doing a lot of catching babies, and she taught me how to suture, and ideally there's no tearing in a careful delivery and a gentle birth. Even then sometimes you have a little tear, so learning how to suture, learning how to all different kinds of techniques for resolving issues, resolving problems. And the prenatal care, I was present for every woman in the practice. We had a visit. The typical regimen of visits in a midwifery practice is every 3 to 4 weeks until the woman is 28 weeks pregnant. 40 weeks pregnant is a full-term baby. They don't always come out at 40 weeks, but 40 weeks is generally what we say is a full-term pregnancy. Your due date would be 40 weeks from the first day of your last period, and that's generally how midwives calculate. So we go from 3 to 4 weeks, every 3 to 4 weeks until 28 weeks, every 2 weeks until 36 weeks, and then in the last month until her due date, we like to see the woman every week. And that's the frequency with which I was part of all these women's prenatal visits. So I got a lot of experience. A prenatal visit was about an hour long. We do childbirth classes as well, and home visits, and I got to participate in everything. Got to teach the childbirth classes, and it was a really full training, really exciting. I still needed, by the end of that time, I took another apprenticeship with another midwife, another really skilled midwife in San Diego County. And we worked at a higher level together because we were kind of like more, rather than she was training me, I was taking clients under supervision. And I took a number of clients under supervision, and then I went on an intensive internship in a birth center on the border of Mexico in Texas, and did a lot more deliveries there, and had a really interesting experience, and learned some Spanish as well. And that was a different kind of experience. It was women, Mexican women coming across the border, and treating them and trying to figure out how to give them good, high-quality care like I had been trained to do, and also in Spanish, in a language that we didn't really share. And it was a really good experience. Learned how to connect really quickly to a woman who you'd never met and you would probably never see again, but you needed to connect to her and give her good care at the moment. And I learned some really valuable things there. The whole time I was learning with this midwife, in this apprenticeship, I had a group of maybe about 8 other women in the same situation that I was in, and having a similar experience but with a different preceptor midwife. And we were all meeting every week or so. We were experiencing our own births and in our practices, as well as studying from books, learning. Let's say I remember getting together. Someone brought a large cut of meat, and we learned how to suture. We practice our sterile technique, and we suture meat. We would run through scenarios together. We would test each other. We had a really good core group of women, and we had a good idea of what we wanted, because we had all been trained by a group of midwives who had all been trained together. So we were almost like the second wave, and it was really interesting how it played out, because we were actually empowered by the fact that we could all look at the way our own preceptors were trained and decide how we wanted to do things a little bit differently. And when we all got licensed together, we actually were really good, we stuck together, and we assisted each other at the births, and we We also were able to develop like a little bit of a standard of how we want to treat our own apprentices, because it's maybe not a lot of people know this, but if you're an apprentice or you're in some kind of apprenticeship role, you understand the dynamic that it's not always easy working with a preceptor midwife. You're trying to learn from her. You're under pressure. There are a number of personality issues. It's not always the easiest thing to get along. So it was a good support group. So the whole time we lived in California and we studied midwifery, and we all were in apprenticeships and we were taking births and we're getting our skills. We were aiming for licensure through the California Medical Board as licensed midwives. That's the non-nurse midwifery license that was available at the time in California, still is. And it's different than a CPM, which is a certified professional midwife. That's a different license. But a lot of LMs, licensed midwives, are also CPMs. Okay, that's the North American Registry of Midwives, NARM. And it's an exam, it's a very difficult exam that midwives pass in order to become licensed as CPMs and also as LMs in California. The Medical Board of California uses the exam from NARM, from North American Registry of Midwives, in order to license its student midwives. Now, the catch is that you have to graduate from an accredited school, and at the time, there was no accredited midwifery school in California. So I offered a test called the Challenge Test. The Challenge basically was a challenge program. In order to qualify for this really difficult test, you had to go through, like I did, an apprenticeship, and you had to document all your skills. You had to have, a certain amount of, 40 babies delivered, and this amount of prenatal visits, and this amount of newborn exams, and this amount of, well woman gynecological exams, all different kinds of experiences in order to qualify to take the test. Now, once they qualified you to take the test, you got to spend 2 days taking a really difficult exam. One day was a practical exam where you would have to, you'd walk into a room and there'd be a woman acting like she was giving birth, and they'd have a bunch of supplies, on a table, and you'd have to, and the scenario on the door was, okay, you're coming into a room, you've been called to a birth by a midwife, she couldn't make it, you're there, what do you do? And there's a whole scenario, and they grade you, and there was a whole lot of different, stations like that. It was a really fun test, actually. We all did really well because of our dynamic. We really knew our stuff. We studied well, we prepared well. The other day was a written test, so we got to write, pages and pages and pages and pages, a lot of writing. And in order to qualify for the state exam, we had to pass that exam. So we all passed. We passed well, okay, and that was really successful, and also encouraging experience for us, so that we all worked together, we all did well, we passed the test. Okay, so basically, once we passed the test, we were able to sit for the licensing exam, and we all sat for that, flew to Sacramento, passed the test, got our license. Everyone did something different. Some people, still stayed in their apprenticeships and worked a little bit more alongside their preceptor, part of the midwifery team, and others started their own practice. I started my own practice in San Diego at the time. It was a really good place to practice at the time. One of the hospitals in the area had agreed to be our backup hospital. One of the doctors at that hospital had agreed to be our consulting physician. We had access to laboratory services. I had a LabCorp account. I could draw blood. I could send labs. We could buy supplies. It was a really good time to be a midwife there. And I enjoyed a really fun and interesting and fulfilling private practice for a couple of years. And why do I talk about it as in the past tense? That was a good time to practice there, because I'm sure it still is a good place to practice, but now I live in Israel. In 3 years after I became licensed, we immigrated to Israel, my husband and my son and I. My son was almost 2 at the time, so he was born about a year after I got licensed. And I've been here for 11 years now, and I have a very interesting thing that I do here in the community. I can tell you more about that. I do miss the dynamic of having a community. I miss the dynamic of having other midwives to refer to, other midwives to call. My dream for getting women encouragement, support, information, and answers to their questions, and specifically their personal questions that are individual to their experience. I've noticed here in Israel, and this is the case now that I've been running Ask A Midwife for, I think it's been about 4 years now, the majority of women around the world don't have someone to ask their questions. Many women have theoretically a care provider, someone that they could make an appointment with if they needed an ultrasound or laboratory, blood work, or there was an emergency. But most women do not have a care provider that's just for them, who knows them, who remembers their previous birth experiences, who has time and patience to really spend the time to try to understand what they need and what they're experiencing and how they can help. So what I've done here, and the case in Israel is that we have a really pretty good medical care program, medical care system, but the women in pregnancy have basically 2 options for getting their questions answered, okay, in terms of their medical care system. They have a doctor that they need to make an appointment with. There's no here, I'll give you my phone number, call me and page me if there's a problem, and you'll get one of the doctors in our practice to call you back. That doesn't really happen here. And the other, and it's not always easy to make an appointment. Sometimes the appointment takes a while to get, so it takes a while. She might have an urgent question, and it's going to take 2 or 3 weeks to get in. So basically, the other option is she goes to the hospital. She wakes up in the middle of the night, she's 32 weeks, she has a strange pain, some odd symptom, and there really isn't anyone to call. So she's going to go into the hospital, even if it was, trapped gas or, something else. She's going to go in. In the case of a private practice where the midwife is available to the woman, she'll call, and the midwife will ask her some questions. She'll talk to her about what she's feeling and maybe spend a few minutes and be able to advise her. There really isn't anything like that here. So even as a pregnant woman myself, there really isn't anyone to ask. I was going into the hospital if I had a question. So I wanted to really support women here in Israel, and I find that the internet, especially Facebook, is a really great way to utilize that social media system for a good and positive cause. Ask a Midwife is a place where women can come and they can get information, they can get support, they can talk to other mothers. It's not just me giving advice. It's also a whole lot of other women who have had experiences and are, seasoned birthers, or they've had problems that other women can relate to, or they have experience and insight that will really help that woman. So I invite other women to also join in and add their experience. I do try to supervise all the discussions and just make sure that no one's getting bad advice, and I don't contradict doctors, and I don't try to get women to do dangerous things, and I'm very, very careful, and I realize that I don't have the whole picture. So when a woman asks a question, most of the time what you'll see is that I'm asking her more questions than she could ever possibly ask me, and through that I'm getting a lot of information. And sometimes I'll ask 20 questions and then say, you need to go to the doctor. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to demonstrate how midwifery care works, and that it isn't like a question and answer service. It's a discussion, it's a learning, it's a process-based experience. Meaning, like when a woman asks a question, it's good if she could get an answer. That's a really positive, but almost secondary. What I really want to demonstrate is how we get the answer in a midwifery client, relationship. It's not like, my head hurts, what should I do? Oh, it's okay to take Tylenol. That might be a question, but I want to ask her, what's her water intake like? What's your, what's your stress level? How's your posture? Are you standing all day? Do you sleep? How's your pillow? What position are you sleeping in? Are you allergic to any foods? And women don't get that kind of care typically. It's either they don't have, the care provider doesn't have time, or the care provider doesn't know how to give that kind of care. So either way, the end result is the same. She takes a Tylenol and hopes that her headache feels better, when really, the food that she was eating might be causing it, or the fact that her pillow is, a flat pillow when really she needs something to support her neck. So regardless, I'm really happy I'm happy that I can be here. I'm happy that I can speak to you. I'm happy that I have an amazing son who just got a really fantastic camera that he'll help me, do this new channel and really get the word out there about, how easy it is to get information online. I really want this channel to be like the Ask a Midwife channel, where I would like through, hopefully I can provide enough content that you can, when you have the time to watch and, enjoy what you're hearing and enjoy hearing me speak a little bit about what I feel and how, and my approach to giving health care and giving pregnancy and prenatal care and birth care to women and supporting them and empowering them and basically believing in women and believing in the process so much that I really feel like with enough information, you can make really good decisions for yourself. And that's why I think that you will really enjoy this channel. So please, in order to support what I'm doing, I'd like you to subscribe to the channel so that you can get updates, and when I post a new video, you'll be able to see those, and also to like. And I welcome any comments, and that's basically it. So enjoy. I hope you have a good, whatever you're experiencing. I hope your pregnancy is healthy. I hope your birth is wonderful and empowering and healthy. And if you have any questions, you can always ask a midwife. So the group link, the Facebook group link, is down below, and I just enjoy speaking with you all and listening to your questions. And if you have any ideas and things that you'd like me to talk about, you can also post a question, and maybe I'll deal with it in a future video. Okay, thanks.